Hey guys, it's Dash Zach back with another review, this time of the Ziigaat Lush. It's a $180 IEM coming from Ziigaat, my first time listening to their IEMs. This is also my second foray into reviewing IEMs. We're going to do about 6x the price of the IEM I'm reviewing versus the ones I did last time, which is pretty exciting for me to jump up a quality that high. I'll be doing a direct comparison with Kiwi's Aether throughout the video, as these are pretty much head-to-head competitors in the price range, although the tuning of them is very different. Speaking of the tuning, these are more of a neutral reference IEM. They would give more of a relaxed sound, which is something that I really enjoyed throughout my time testing them. But are these the perfect IEMs for you? Let's find out. So here we have it, the Ziigaat Lush. Couldn't scroll a mouse across the screen, so I spun an IEM. Why the heck not? Anyway, this is the first IEM I have tried from Ziigaat, and it comes in at $180. Just as a heads up, as you can probably tell here, I'll be doing the main comparison throughout this video with the Kiwi or Aether. These are planar IEMs that I've been maining for quite a while now, and by quite a while I mean a couple months, but that's as long as I've had them. They have been my favorite IEMs I had found up until this point, and we'll see how the accessory kit, physical IEMs themselves, and the sound compare and contrast with the Ziigaat Lush. So as you can see here, we have the entire contents of the box on the mouse pad. Shout out to Matrova. This is not my actual mouse pad, this is a friend's, but it's pretty sick, custom X-Wing art in a huge 600 by 500 size. Absolutely love it. In the box, you get this carrying case, which is actually quite nice and quite sturdy. My main complaint would be if you try to unzip this thing, it's really tough and gets stuck often, so the zipper is not of the highest quality. You get a little pocket here to store your ear tips in, and then a spot for the actual IEMs themselves. I do like that the size of this case is a little bit larger than the case that you get with Kiwi ears. The amount of protection they supply is about the same. I also like that in the Ziigaat case here, we have an actual sort of mechanism to close this area up and to keep things in there more easily than just the one little spot here that things can sort of fall out of on the Kiwi ears case. Beside that, you get what I would call one set of ear tips down here. There are these foam ear tips, which I would really never use myself, and then one set of medium, small, and large silicone tips, which I'll show you here. These tips were fine. I used them for a little bit, didn't love them, didn't hate them. They were definitely passable, but I do most of my testing with FinFit W1s, as you can see here. I had to go with the mediums on this, which I'll talk about a little bit later as to why that was. Typically, I go like a medium, small. Occasionally, I go a small. It all depends on the IEM sort of construction of both the shell as well as the nozzle type. The last bit to talk about before we get to the actual IEM themselves is the cable here. I have heard people say this is a high quality cable. I beg to differ. You might be able to tell here, but after being wrapped up, it's just a little bit more prone to being coiled, twisted, and just sort of retaining that like sort of wrap. It always felt like it was a little bit twisted. I guess I would say the cables had a little bit more memory than I would like. Also, one thing to note, the chin slider here is very loose on the cable. So again, there's a chin slider provided, but it will just sort of literally slide willy-nilly up and down the cables without you moving it intentionally, which is pretty darn annoying to have to keep resetting that. As I don't typically use that myself, I usually keep it all the way here at the bottom. So one thing to know if you're similar to me, and just in general, it didn't really stay in place like I wanted it to. For comparison, this is the cable from the Kiwi ears Aether, and I find it to be very forgetful. Lol. Sort of just doesn't really have any memory. The construction of it is sort of a similar braided coiled cable here, and both of these have just a standard 2-pin connector, but overall this was just a much more, pliable, again, more forgetful, less memory on this cable, and I enjoyed it quite a bit more for a cable coming on an IEM in the exact same price range. The design of the IEMs is pretty cool. I definitely say it's understated, but it does have a little dazzle to it. As you can see, as moved around here in the light, there is some sparkling going on. You got the Ziigaat logo printed on the front, and then Lush on the back of both of these. The Lush is also a hybrid IEM. It has one dedicated driver and then 4 balanced armature drivers. And I believe the dynamic driver is also being used as a subwoofer. And then they split the other 2 balanced armature drivers between the mids and the highs, which I think is a pretty standard setup. I'm not super well versed on this, but from what I understand, that's nothing too crazy. And then one more note in use, I did get some, as far as build-wise, driver flex with these, which is not obviously something that you want on an IEM. These aren't too high on like the cost spectrum, I guess, of overall IEMs, but for my budget, these are probably on the upper end, being $180. So having driver flex is not the best. It didn't really bother me too much in reality while I was listening to music, but just something to note if you're looking to pick these up. And yes, there is one vent on the top of each of these IEMs. I did not experience any pressure buildup while using these. As I turn it side to side, you can sort of see how the construction here, along with the nozzle, is a little bit longer than I would like to see. It sort of dug a little bit deeper into my ear. It does help get a good seal, but it also, I think, caused a little bit of discomfort over time. When I use these on long listening sessions, I would get a little bit of discomfort with the ear, and that did sort of mitigate itself over time. They also are not the narrowest in diameter of nozzles that I've seen. I would say they're on the medium to larger side. These shells are made of a 3D printed resin. It feels nice in hand, obviously very light. No metal construction in these beside the nozzle. So overall, pretty standard for an IEM in this price range and a majority of the IEMs that I've tested. If we bring in one of the Aethers, immediately you can see that the front of this is just like less sort of contoured to the shape of your ear, and that's demonstrated as well on the back. You can see this part here that leads up to the nozzle juts out more, but also in that way fits into your ear deeper, I would say. Whereas the base of the nozzle on the Kiwi ears Aether is a lot closer to the, base of the shell. So these do stick out a little bit further in my ear, and these are just massive shells to begin with. So I would say comfort-wise, as far as the actual physical shell, Ziigaat is more comfortable because it contours my ear better. But ironically, because of this large shell here, the Nozzle does not go as deep into my ear. I'm still able to get a good seal depending on which ear tips I use, and it does cause less discomfort over long listening sessions. As far as style-wise, I would give the Kiwi ears Aether a little bit more style points because of this silver outline here, but overall the aesthetic is pretty similar. Neither of them are going to pop really in public. No one's going to be like, oh man, what are those IEMs? They look so cool. But I mean, honestly, still though, I don't mind the understated look, and I was pretty satisfied with both of these. Now we get to the part of the review where we talk about the sound, and I have no idea what to do on camera, so I'm going to go ahead and start out here by showing you the tuning on hangout.audio for these. They're very close to a new meta, but there's a slight difference here from what I understand. But anyway, overall these have a very neutral tuning with a slight sub-bass boost, but the bass isn't too boosted in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't too much for me. I still enjoyed it and was glad to have that little bit of a boost there. Overall, it still stays pretty clean. And honestly, beside that, the rest of this is just a pretty neutral sound, very studio reference, perfect for editing music, for just listening back to what you played or recorded and hearing it exactly as it was. Mids-wise, like, it doesn't hide vocals too much, but it doesn't like push them to the front really. They just kind of sit there and sound as they should. The mids in this IEM definitely aren't really going to pop, so if that's something you're looking for, you're going to want to look elsewhere beside the Lush. But overall, I would say it just has a very safe sound. Something that I've noticed in IEMs as we come to the treble is that sometimes things like cymbals in like Defying Gravity from the Wicked soundtrack can sound sort of muted or mushed in with the rest of the sounds, and this did not happen here. Even though it sounds very neutral, the cymbals in that situation, I have tried to say this 10 times now, the cymbals in that situation still delivered a nice crash, but were very separate from the rest of the sounds, and that's something that I've looked for recently when I test an IEM. Defying Gravity is one of the tracks that I go to right away, and I jump to that part of the song just to hear separation of sounds with like the buzzing before those cymbals come in. It's at about 4:51, I believe, in the song where I typically start listening as a quick reference. That separation of sound, the sort of location on the left, right of that little buzzing, followed by the cymbals and making sure that they're very clear, is something the Lush achieved very well, and it made listening to the whole soundtrack, including that song, very enjoyable. But I also had a good time listening to stuff like Skrillex's new album, F.U. Skrillex, you think you're Andy Warhol, but you're not. The track Druids, for example, still sounded very enjoyable and lively for me. The bass boost was appreciated there and sounded good. The separation was nice. I wasn't quite as exciting, I would say, as if listening to it on my Kiwi ears Aether, for example, but it was still a very enjoyable experience. Do bear with me as I talk about the sound of these IEMs, as this is the first time I've really delved even remotely deeply into it, so I might sound like an idiot. Please let me know in the comments if you disagree with me, if I said anything you think is wrong. I'd love to learn more. 100% open to that. I would say as far as imaging goes on these IEMs, it was very good. I use these quite a bit in Fortnite, and I was able to pick up sounds, honestly, that I hadn't heard before as far as footsteps go, and I was instantly able to tell where those footsteps were coming from. No issue switching to IEMs from an over-the-ear headset. These are very, very good in that way, and they perform similarly well imaging-wise in songs. As far as the separation goes, it was very good. You could tell instruments were split. They weren't really melded together anymore. If you clearly wanted to focus in on one instrument, you could do so. So even though the sound here is very neutral, it didn't really take away from the separation of sound and instruments at all. As I stated before, the Aether from Kiwi were the main contrast as far as the comparison of the sound here. And I didn't really do like A/B testing where I switch back and forth frequently, but I go a day or two on the Lush, a day or two on the Aether, and then come back and forth. I initially did enjoy the Aether a bit more, and I think overall they are still my preferred IEM, just because they're more of a V-shape, they're a lot more fun to listen to. But there are times where the Lush really stands out. Its natural reference sort of sound really, I think it thrives on like songs you would almost feel like you're in a studio. Songs like Stick Season from Noah Kahan. I've been listening to the new Mumford album. I actually prefer to listen to those on the Ziigaat. Just sort of more like folksy, natural sounding music just sounded amazing on the Ziigaat. And honestly, all the music I listened to sounded really good. It was just like a very chill experience. Like you wouldn't really get any fatigue if you listen to these for a longer time, whereas that did occasionally happen to me on the Aether. I don't usually listen to music consistently that long on IEMs, but when I do, I actually prefer the Lush for that. As far as long listening sessions for gaming go, I would say that I prefer the Aether. Again, oddly enough, these might be really uncomfortable for some people because the shell is so huge, but again, it doesn't penetrate deeply into your ear, at least mine, with how my ear canals are. And the Lush, I would say there wasn't really discomfort while I was using them, but as soon as I pulled the ear tips out, I would feel like just a soreness in my ears. And I thought, hey, maybe this will go away. And it did sort of like, it lessened, as I mentioned earlier, over the time that I tested these, which was for about 2 weeks, but it never really went away. I guess if I maintained these for quite a while, it probably would. I also mentioned this earlier, I had to use medium ear tips with these to get a good seal. Even though potentially a smaller ear tips would have been less obtrusive and maybe caused less soreness, the medium spin fit W1s were what gave me the best seal, so that's what I stuck with. And it is also what I typically use here on the Aethers. I talked about Skrillex's album, and I would say that it's just way more exciting on the Aether, but that kind of makes sense with more V-shaped leaning tuning and the fact that it has a bigger bass boost than the Lush. I forgot to talk about soundstage. For being such a neutral reference IEM, the soundstage on the Lush is actually pretty impressive. It's relatively open. It's not quite as large, in my opinion, as the Aether, but it doesn't disappoint at all. I think the soundstage on this IEM here is quite the standout, but it's definitely not a detractor at all on the Lush. And I guess the comparison between the sound of these two IEMs just really brings out the fact that the Lush is more of a like natural, relaxing sort of a feeling. Like you just want to sit back, chill, listen to some music for a while. And the Aether, it just sort of pops. It really brings the liveliness out of the song. It really just kind of goes for it. But again, like I was saying, I could justify having both of these. I'm going back and forth between both of these based on how I'm feeling comfort-wise, based on like what kind of music I'm listening to at the time. I'll stick to the Lush from Mumford. I'll pop back to pop, EDM, probably use the Aethers. Overall, I will say the Lush, it did not disappoint me at all. At first, I thought this was like, oh man, this is boring. This isn't a lot of fun. And that might be how you feel about the IEM, but just based on your preferences. Just know you're getting a very neutral reference IEM. Something like the Aether may be more fun for you, may pop more, or you may want to look in a different direction entirely. That's up to you. The more I listen to this, the more I came to appreciate the way that it's tuned, and the more I came to enjoy using it, and sort of just kind of honed in on what type of music I wanted to listen to when I was using the Lush. But I'm very glad that I had my time with the Lush. Again, not ending. I'm going to keep using it. It definitely opened my eyes to the fact that you don't have to have the most exciting tuning to really have a clean, enjoyable experience listening to music on an IEM. And yeah, overall, very much appreciate linsoul sending these out to me. Again, this was a review unit, but that did not influence any of my thoughts or opinions. They were all my own. If you look at the tuning, take my word for how it sounds, and that's exactly what you're looking for. The Lush will deliver on that front. You will not be disappointed, and it has my full absolute recommendation. As far as the actual performance of the IEM goes, I will say, as I mentioned earlier, the things that were detractors, I didn't love the ear tips. They were fine. I'll be replacing the cable on this because it just has too much memory, tangles, and just stays too coiled up. This isn't a big deal. The zipper was a little sticky on the case, but overall the case was very nice. I appreciate the large size and the sort of hard shell protection that it provided. And yeah, that about sums up my thoughts on the Ziigaat Lush. We'll see you.